There has never been a better time to start a podcast than in 2021. But how do you do it? In this video, we'll break down the podcast equipment you need, the software to record and edit, then strategies to grow and monetize your show in 9 easy steps. Before we get into it, you might be wondering, who is this guy to tell you how to podcast? I'm James, I'm a podcast producer and editor. I've worked with hundreds of clients through my podcast production agency, and I've learned a thing or two along the way. I also run the Indie Bites podcast, which is in the top 10% of all podcasts. Also, this video is going to be focusing on audio podcasts specifically, but most of these tips will apply to video podcasts. However, if you're looking to learn specifically about video podcasts, check out this video in the top right corner. If you clicked on this video, you're probably considering if podcasting is worth the effort it takes to get one launched and see the results. Podcasting is hard. It takes time and you've got to be consistent with it, but the rewards can be excellent. If you're starting a podcast for your brand, for marketing, it's a fantastic way to build trust with your audience or your potential customers. This is because of the amount of time they're spending with your hosts, whether that be your founders or representatives of the brand. As they spend time listening to your show and get to know you and your brand, you'll be top of mind when they need to purchase a solution to their problem. It can also be a fantastic tool for networking. You can have conversations with people you might have never had the chance to without the podcast. I managed to have an hour-long conversation and recording with the CEO of HubSpot thanks to my podcast. You can start a podcast around something you're passionate about and even turn it into a full-time income in the future, which we'll talk about in the monetization section of this video. Before you get started with actually recording your show, you need to think about what your podcast premise is actually going to be and what format you want to have. From here, you'll then need to create a brand for your podcast and choose how often you'll be publishing your show. If you find it hard to come up with a good podcast idea, ask yourself the following 4 questions. What do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? And what can you be paid for? Look for the intersection of all of these and where they all come together. This should give you an indication of the areas where you can provide value and follow through with your podcast. Once you've got your killer idea, the chances are you'll have a format in mind. Are you thinking of a guest interview for your show? This is the most common, but there is a lot of demand for interviews with interesting people. You could put a spin on your interview show by turning it into a narrative-driven show, like many you'll see by NPR or Gimlet, or documentary style like this awesome Breaking Brand show by Buffer. You could also do a co-hosted show which is topic-based, or even a regular news show. The Daily from the New York Times is an incredibly popular news show. We'll be doing a whole separate video on podcast format, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Idea and format sorted, the next step is creating a distinctive brand. Come up with a unique name that raises intrigue, but is also clear what the podcast is about. Some names I like: Breaking Brand, How I Built This, and All Consuming. If you're not too sure of a name, you can use your existing brand or be quite descriptive. The Joe Rogan Experience is a pretty easy to remember name and one that is easy to come up with. You then need to create the podcast star in a 3000 by 3000 pixels square image that you'll see in the podcast players. This is super important, so you can hire a designer on Upwork to create one, or if you're on a budget and have design shops, you can create your own in Figma or Canva or Photoshop or a software similar. Some podcasts are 2 hours long, some are 2 minutes. It's down to your format and content, but pick a length that works for you. Also, pick a day or date you'll publish your episodes. Podcasts reward consistency, so whether you're publishing daily, weekly or monthly, ensure that you stick to a schedule. Question that I get asked most about podcasting is, what microphone should I buy? The microphone is the single most important piece of gear you'll have for your podcast because it directly impacts your audio quality, which of course should be top of your priority list for your podcast. We've created a few videos on the channel about the best gear for podcasting, so we'll leave the link in the description. There are a ton of decisions you need to make to find a mic that best suits your needs. First of all, spend no less than $100 on your microphone if you can. Spending less than this will usually get you low quality to the point where you could probably just use your phone for recording. For an easy option that plugs directly into your laptop, you can use the Rode NT USB Mini, which is $100. Many people use the Blue Yeti, but I wouldn't always recommend it as it is a condenser mic and the Rode is a dynamic mic. Dynamic mics are much more forgiving, are directional, so it's better for when you don't have a perfect recording environment. Condenser mics will work best in well-treated environments like a music or podcast studio. Both of these mics have a headphone output so you can monitor your audio and make sure it sounds good. This is important if you're purchasing a USB mic. If you're looking for a slightly more flexible setup, you can start looking into XLR microphones, which have an analog signal versus a digital signal you get with USB microphones. This does mean that you need to get an audio interface. I'd recommend the Scarlett 2i2, but we'll touch on this in a second. XLR microphones can be a huge range of prices. For these videos, I use a Shure SM58. For my podcast, I use a Rode Procaster, and you'll see many professional podcasters using the legendary Shure SM7B, which is around $400. So if you're recording with an XLR microphone, you'll need to pick up an interface or recorder to capture that analog signal from your microphone. Interfaces will also provide phantom power to those microphones that require it. Just to be clear, this is not something you'll need if you choose a USB microphone. They are plug and play. The most popular interface is the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, which you can pick up for around $100. This has two XLR inputs for two microphones along with a headphone output so you can monitor the recording. This type of interface will plug into your computer or laptop and allow you to record on a software like Audacity, Adobe Audition, or directly into Riverside.fm. If you want to record directly onto a device, you'll need a recorder. For these videos and my in-person podcast, I use a Zoom H6. If you want one of the best options on the market, you can get a mixing board like the Rode Rodecaster, which has 4 XLR inputs and a pad to add effects and music live during your show. Both the H6 and the Rodecaster record to an SD card and micro SD card, and also work as an interface into your laptop or computer. While recording with your microphone, you'll want to be able to monitor your levels to ensure you're not clipping and to check nothing has gone wrong. You'll see a lot of podcasters use the Audio-Technica ATH M50X, which are fantastic quality and the ones that I use for my podcast. Here's a little summary of all of that gear mentioned in the previous segment. Take a screenshot of this if you want to reference it in future. Want to get the most out of your microphone? Watch this video on how to make your podcast audio sound like you're a radio host. Now you're set with all your equipment, it's time to record your show. In 2021, it isn't quite possible yet to record in person, so we'll need to get the highest possible quality remotely. Unfortunately, Zoom quality doesn't quite cut it for podcasts, so we'll need to do something called a double-ender recording. We've got a whole video on the benefits of a double-ender recording, so we'll leave a link to that in the top right of the screen now. A double-ender recording is essentially when a high-quality file is taken from the source, aka your microphone, instead of over an internet connection, like with Zoom. In the past, this meant manually recording with the microphone of each person on the podcast, but now we can record using Riverside.fm and get lossless WAV files that sound like you're in the same room as your guests or co-hosts. Riverside also records up to 4K video too, which we've got another video for you here. You can then take your high quality files from Riverside.fm or whatever you've used to record your show and bring them into your editing software. If you're on a Mac, you can edit on GarageBand completely free. If you're on a PC, you can edit on Audacity for free too, which is also available on Mac. For more advanced tools, you can upgrade to Adobe Audition, Logic Pro, or Avid Pro Tools, which give you a bunch more control when you're editing your show. However, for most podcasts, you can create something very high quality using these free tools. Here's a quick list of things you need to do in your edit. First, cut out any unwanted audio, any ums and ahs, dogs barking, and breaks in the recording. Normalize your tracks and add a compressor for any spikes in those decibels. You can use an EQ on your voice to change the sound profile, but this is down to personal preference. Here's a quick example of the difference between adding a lot of EQ and the source sound. Finally, add your music and your intros and outros for your branding, and also add sponsor slots where you have them. We're almost there, stick with me. We've got our show created, now it's time to get it published. Of course, we've created a whole separate video showing you how you can get your podcast onto the podcast apps, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, but here's a quick recap. You need to pick a host that takes your file and sends it to the podcast apps when you publish. There are a ton of options that are pretty similar in features. Subscribe to the channel to see the video where we're going to do an in-depth comparison of some of the podcast hosts. Some options include Transistor, Buzzsprout, Podbean, Sounder.fm, and more. When you're set up on your podcast host, you'll need to publish with an engaging title, a descriptive episode summary, and in-depth show notes. This will all help people find your show and choosing which episodes they're going to listen to. Time to start growing your show. This is where the consistency really pays off. Remember when I mentioned your upload schedule earlier? Stick to that and keep publishing. As there is no native discoverability mechanism for podcasting, you need to work hard for those first few episodes to earn your listeners. Once you're creating fantastic content that your audience is loving, it will start to grow organically. Here's some ideas for promotion. It may seem obvious, but cross-promote your show across all of your social media channels. Create short snippets of your show using software like Wave, Veed, or Headliner. You can then transcribe your show for SEO benefits and create a page on your website where you share each transcription. For an even bigger benefit, you can write a summary of the episode on your blog, leverage that existing traffic that you have, outlining the things that people will learn from that specific episode. If you can, guest on other people's podcasts. People who listen to podcasts will want to find new podcasts to listen to, so try to get on others if you can. Get your guests to share your show with their audience. This can be especially handy if they're influential in your industry. Make this really easy for them. You can send them a clip or an image that they can use so that they look good. Ask people to review your podcast on Apple Podcasts, as this will help push your podcast up the podcasting charts, which can be a great source of new listeners. Also, build up an own channel around your podcast. This could be in the form of an email list where you send your subscribers an email every time a new episode goes out, or a blog where you write your summaries. A direct communication channel for your podcast, such as an email list, can be extremely valuable over time as your show grows. So you're starting to see some good growth from your show because you followed all of these tips previously. You're now ready to monetize. There are two main ways that you can make money from your podcast. The first is sponsor deals, the second is memberships. For my podcast, Indie Bites, I have both sponsors and a membership, and I've done that from quite early on in the show. I know that my aim for the podcast was to be a side income for me while talking to some inspirational founders, so monetization was important. I know who the audience for my show is, I get my analytics from my podcast hosts, so I knew I had value to bring to sponsors. I reached out to a few companies I thought were a good fit, we agreed on a price, and now I have sponsors for my podcast that make a nice income. Memberships are when you have exclusive content for people that pay you a monthly fee and become members. This does involve extra work, but if you've got an engaged audience that are after more content, you can create behind the scenes, bonus Q&As, more written content, and more. So there you have our ultimate guide for starting a podcast in 2021. From choosing your idea, finding the right gear, recording your show in Riverside.fm, editing, publishing, growing, and even monetizing. We want to hear from you. Have you started a podcast? Leave a link in the comments below. We're going to be producing a bunch more videos on this YouTube channel about podcasting, video interviews, and more. So if you want to learn more about starting and growing a podcast, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for watching.